I'm Daniel Miller, and this is my daily podcast for Tuesday, 6th of April of 2021. A warm welcome to all of our friends, fans, community members, participants, squad mates and viewers worldwide on various platforms. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for supporting our online community here on my channel. Thank you for being our valued community members, being so dedicated to being here with us every single day. Our Easter had come and gone, and it's been a wonderful weekend. I rested really well. I played some of the best games available at the moment throughout the period of 4 days. Had lengthy strolls in our local nature reserve, had wonderful dinners. Really the best possible Easter I could ask for. Hopefully all of you are having exactly the same. Hopefully you are adhering to social distancing rules. Hopefully you were at home, healthy, safe and well, and indeed enjoying some of the favorite games that you have at present. Everyone at the moment is playing Outriders. I talked about the game quite a bit during the last few days. We streamed it as well as the game got released, and we'll get back to it later in the week. As presently there are some technical issues, and therefore I don't want to be really bombarding and boring our viewers with, waiting for 20-30 minutes in order to get the connection to the server, which is what's been happening on Saturday and Sunday. And Outriders is the hottest new game in town. Everybody wants to try it. There's a lot of hype created about the game on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit and all other forums. And sadly, although on one hand we have a very, very greatly elated gaming community worldwide, the game is also receiving some very negative publicity. And I don't understand for the life of me as to why all the big hubs were biased towards some other games, and I guess prejudicial in their reports towards Outriders, because I didn't really find the game to be so badly written, so looking like an old-gen game with little work spent on the characters and the animation, etc, etc. The list just goes on and on, like boring fighting sequences, repetitive gameplay, all the other things. And also I was astonished to see that some people finishing the game in 14 hours. They're doing speedruns, they're not unlocking the content which is out there, and they're not enjoying everything that is on offer. And I certainly played 2 of those demos together for a lot more than 14 hours, probably more like 30 hours. It's hard to tell, I need to look at the stats, but certainly the demo itself, if you were doing it on either of the platforms, would take you quite a bit of time if you wanted to complete everything that was there for you to discover, and indeed if you were to be doing the inventory. So I don't really buy any of it. Hugely disappointed with some of the reviews I read, more specifically in Eurogamer and PC Gamer, that were really slating the game and literally telling everyone that the game is far too expensive for what it is, that people shouldn't waste the investment and that kind of nonsense. Well, actually, we are not going to be purchasing the game, all of us on Xbox Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription, accessing the game from the word go there through the streaming services. And quite frankly, I took full advantage of that together with everyone else. And I think all the reviewers need to look at the stats The game is having lots of concurrent participants on any one of these days. I think on the first day we're talking about 130,000, and the number of participants has been increasing, although it may be variable during the weekend because of those technical issues. They had to be disconnecting multiplayer several times because the cross-platform access was causing all the issues. But anyway, I tried this out there for you to try. I'm certain after a week or so the game will perform perfectly, and just when we compare it with the demo, and I play demo both on PlayStation and Xbox, I can certainly tell you it performs a lot better. The graphics are mouth-watering, and they did apply some Microsoft tech, I think. I've seen some Microsoft labels attached to the game afterward, as I was doing it during the last couple of days, and that's obviously significantly different compared to what we had initially on the demo, and I'm very pleased to say that it all worked perfectly for me. I had an issue with a glitch as I wanted to do the replay of the whole game from the very beginning, and that was, I think, to do with the sheer number of participants who were out there. And then instead of doing it on the new character, I've gone back to the demo character, and I had no problems whatsoever. Everything worked perfectly. I did have problems with server connectivity on Saturday and Sunday, and therefore I discontinued with my daily streams due to that, because I thought it was irritating me somewhat, and it was obviously quite difficult to get the connection, and their team was just absolutely impeccable with the messaging on Twitter and telling everyone what the problems were, giving them the exact periods of time what they expected for the problems to be resolved. They really excelled, and they were much more community friendly and a lot more responsive than any other AAA blockbuster developer I've seen in recent years. So hats off to People Can Fly. So for myself, in addition to my wonderful dinners and lovely strolls in nature reserve and enjoying the sunshine, here in London suburbs we had some very cold weather but beautifully clear skies, and it was ideal for trekking and exploring the nature, or remaining in the wild, so to speak. And I really had plenty of fun there with the endangered species, with animals, and with no people. And really, that was the best possible way through which I could spend my Easter, and being rewarded by very good dinners. In fact, I asked my friends who cook my dinner every single day to do a grill. It was like a mixed grill, and usually I have a vegetable spread which is prepared every single. It's not even on the menu. It's just like a tailor-made, custom-made meal, and I had this wonderful grill that was very hard to finish, I have to say. It was a massive portion with couscous and rice and 6 salads and 3 different types of meat, and generally I eat meat very rarely, so it was my first meat meal in probably more than 3 or 4 months. Well, actually since Christmas. The last time I ate was my organic chicken for Christmas dinner, but it's been a few months, and certainly the dinner was wonderful. So anyway, great Easter weekend. I talked about the games I played, and well, 2 of them you will know, Yakuza and The Outer Worlds. Yakuza being a brilliant adventure stroke RPG stroke fighting game, and we have like 1,000 chapters to get through. Can you imagine 1,000 chapters if we were looking at the entire series? And thanks to Jeff Rubinstein and his support for Yakuza, the entire series had arrived to Xbox and Microsoft, so therefore the majority of the games we can already see and play through Game Pass, which is fantastic. And I've gone initially to PlayStation to try Yakuza 4, which is there on PS Now services, and loved it. I thought it was incredible. But once I migrated to the remastered version of 3, 4 and 5 on the Game Pass, it was just a different story. It's like a next-gen game, and everything is perfect, from beautiful graphics and razor-sharp characters through wonderful audio, which is very distinct and very precise. You can hear every single vehicle, every single participant. Butterflies and mosquitoes are on the soundtrack, so therefore you will make sure that you hear everything perfectly through your high-quality headset. And most importantly, have this wonderfully told story, which is very emotional. You really feel very, very, closely bonded to the characters. And the Yakuza character in number 3 is running an orphanage, and well, he's a former gangster and he wants to do something noble. So really feel so much for the children. So it's an ideal game for this sort of period if you want to be, doing it bit by bit and unlocking side quests and getting to know everything about the story. It takes a while, so it's not a game which you can be speed running if you want to really enjoy it, but an ideal companion to all else in our library. So that's certainly my top 1 game. But then on the other hand, on Friday I had the Outer Worlds on my list for quite some time, and I had a few messages from my associates who said, you really need to try the Outer Worlds because you've gone back to Fallout and you talked a lot about 76 and 3 and 4 and the original 1 and 2, which were strategy games, and you will love the Outer Worlds because it does have the elements of the original series, and it's also significantly different, blending in so well with other Obsidian titles, and probably the most complex Obsidian title ever released. So I watched also the trailer that came our way a couple of days ago, a week ago or so, for the latest DLC, and that looked really interesting. It looked like LA Noire type of investigative plot was being imported into a sci-fi opera, and that really grabbed me. I was very interested because, yeah, most perturbingly, the character who got killed is one of the main characters in the Outer World. So I really want to find out what happened to her. And I said, well, because I've downloaded it to my console, I'll just have a look. But then it wasn't just having a look. I was grabbed, and I just stayed in there, since that Friday, which is already about 4 or 5 days ago. I've just stayed in it, and everything in it is just really top notch. What really grabs you is the ease through which the story is told, the number of characters that you meet, the quantity of activities you'll need to complete, and the sheer number of quests. I've got to say, I don't remember playing any other game where so early in the game I had so many side quests. And all of the side quests were thoroughly enjoyable, and they were all kind of tied in with the story. So it wasn't just doing pedestrian activities and neutralizing enemies, but every single time you had something to do in that area. You were coming across some difficult enemies, and therefore you had to complete that task in order to maybe pick up an item, unlock hack a computer, unlock a couple of crates to get something that needs to be brought to another NPC. The list just goes on and on. And quite frankly, after I played it now for 4 or 5 days, it is, I guess, coming to the level of the games like Destiny and Mass Effect in the sheer volume. What I really like about the Outer Worlds is, when you talk to an NPC, obviously depending on what character you're approaching, you will get quite a lengthy number of dialogue options, and they're comprising like 2 different approaches. One is 3 different types of character that you have: polite and friendly, or the other one being kind of sarcastic, and the third one being abrasive. So that's very similar to what we had in Fallout, right? So 3 different types, 3 different character traits. But then the rest of the questions, they're all directed to they're directed at the NPC, and they're all blending in well with the story. So you learn a lot about the story, and more questions you ask, which are story based, greater the number of side quests there will be. Don't forget, if you are coming across computers that need to be hacked, if you're hacking the computers, you are getting a lot of information that's blending in with the story and providing you with the clues. So that's quite a discovery, and I was able to get quite a lot of information from some of those hacked computers that was very useful with my quests, like for instance collecting pages of a certain book, or collecting several books for another NPC, looking for the whereabouts of a weapon, etc, etc. The list just goes on. But what really amazes me is how beautifully that's all blending together. So it's all the activities completely blending in with the story, and I think these were certainly the complaints launched at some of the games that popped up recently. Watch Dogs Legion and Cyberpunk 2077 are amongst these, because not played Cyberpunk, so I'm not the one to say, but there was a big complaint launched and launched at CD Projekt Red, saying you had this fantastically, incredibly beautiful designed city, but very little activities are taking place in certain quarters. I think we were jumping gun because this is a massive, massive big map, but it will open up a huge number of possibilities for DLCs and anything else extra, and that's exactly what will be happening in the future. So that it's understandable. You have the main kind of core campaign, and then everything else will be developing as we go along. But in War Dogs Legion, I thought that there was a problem between the story and the activity. It felt slightly disjointed, similar to, I've got to say, similar to the design, because you've had already, after you looked at certain sceneries, a clear picture of 3 different companies working on 3 different sections of the game. One working on the characters, NPCs, and your protagonist, the other working on the environment, and the third one erecting objects and signs within that environment. And they just didn't gel. They looked as if they've come from different quarters, so that was noticeable. On the other hand, I really liked the inventions in War Dogs Legion with spider bots and the use of the tech. It's a niche game. I think they really wanted to present us with a game that would appeal to wider audiences, but that's definitely not going to be the case. It does comprise the elements of Splinter Cell and some of the other sort of stealthier games. I'm trying to think. Splinter Cell is Assassin's Creed, of course. These 2 games together, but I guess Watch Dogs Legion is more inclined towards Splinter Cell than the Assassins, because of the gameplay and the way the way you need to do it. You need to be really very quiet, like a ghost at all times. And you say Ghost Recon, but it's a different sort of game altogether. Ghosting, or being stealthy, is the only common denominator in all 3 of these. And I think the Outer Worlds is excelling in the areas where perhaps the other games, I wouldn't say failing, but having some issues. And that certainly is what grabbed me, because I love these story-driven games, and I loved the original Elder Scrolls, Oblivion and Morrowind. I loved Skyrim, but I love Fallout, and these are Bethesda games. I love Dishonored. I love all the other games that would have come out of the same studio. But obviously for me, the ultimate masterpiece so far still is BioWare's Mass Effect. And that's not just one of those 3 games in isolation, it's the overall universe when comprised together, because of the way the stories are told, the number of characters that you meet, and everything together. I'm extremely excited about the new Legendary Edition that will be released next month, and I will be telling you a bit about it very, very shortly. I have some articles indicating what the changes are applied to those 3 games together. Don't forget, in addition to the actual tech changes, the way the graphics are going to be coming across, the sound and everything else, they are reworking the number of trophies and achievements, as well as some other activities. The overall environment looks very, very different because it's massively improved. Specifically, when you look at the first game, it's really an old, the old gen game belonging to the world of Xbox original. It was released on 360, but still, I remember when it got released, I felt that it didn't really perform too well due to various technical issues, and so I'm very, very excited about it, and really altogether still feel that the components that they offered, particularly in the sequel, Mass Effect 2, have still not been superseded. And I must admit, the Outer Worlds is coming close to that, right? Because in Outer Worlds, similar to Mass Effect, you're also collecting or selecting your companions. So you have quite a selection, altogether about 6, who can do different missions together with you, and you are then able to select a companion who will be doing certain tasks with you. They have special powers and skills. If you know what you're going to be doing, you can obviously select 2 of these that are most appropriate, and the list just goes on and on. So that there are similarities and differences, and also the way you are directing your character to a particular task, giving them orders or giving directions, is resembling Mass Effect. So Mass Effect definitely part and parcel of it. I didn't make many references previously when I described the Outer Worlds, because visually the game is significantly different. Visually it sort of blends in with Borderlands or with Apex, it's a bit of a retro graphic novel style world, but the animation in the game is incredible, and I think on my Xbox One X I'm getting really very high frame rate as well. Plays very smoothly, and I really wanted to be kind of part of that world, so therefore I went quite close to my television screen, which is something I never do. The other world is not a high octane game. It's not very pacey. You will have some battles, but overall it's a very slow pace. Similar to Fallout, you'll be walking a lot from one place to another and exploring the open world and collecting various items, and you get battles obviously, but a lot of it is, a lot of the game is spent on dialogue and discussions. So therefore, I didn't have to be too far away from the screen, and also contrary to what I usually do, I was playing a game lying down in my bed, and it did bring a significantly different experience of the game. It's for the first time I've ever done it. Can you imagine? I've never done it before, ever. In 30 years, I've never been playing a game if I was lying down. So that was quite an experience, and being not too far from 16-inch screen meant that I was feeling very immersed in the open world and very close to my character. So I became an active participant, full stop, fully fledged, and definitely enjoyed everything that I experienced. It felt, I remember listening to Phil Spencer and Larry Hryb talking a little while back about the next gen gaming, and Phil said for us what's really the utmost priority, because we are already resolving backward compatibility and xCloud access, so that's all done and dusted. We're in the motion of applying it. We already have got the technology, we already created everything that's necessary. But the next thing for us as gamers will be the quality of that experience, because if you're entering the games like Borderlands 3 or Destiny 2 or the Outer Worlds or the Outriders, all these games will have massive big world which you will become a part of, right? And you will want to have the best possible quality of that experience. So we want to provide the high quality tech, which means very high frame rate, very smooth animation, together with headsets and other bits of equipment which you can buy in order to get the best possible audio, and then high quality television sets, of course, or monitors, which are giving you the highest resolution possible. And LCDs, OLEDs, and LEDs are all very good. If you go for the top range TVs like Sony Bravia or Panasonic's, and the television sets that have also huge durability as well as high quality of resolution, you will not fail. For instance, my TV is not OLED, it's LCD, but the quality picture on it when you're watching games through Xbox or PlayStation is just mouth-watering. To tell you the truth, mouth-watering images coming out of Netflix and Amazon Prime as well, to my great surprise, is absolutely astonishing quality, and it's the new tech. So, cut long story short, all of that is about the quality experience. And don't forget, a lot of people play their game for the first time by themselves in order to get to know what to do and the experience for the first time. Like myself, many gamers do not like being pushed by the guys who already have gone there several times, and they don't appreciate through random matchmaking getting the guys who are doing speedruns. I mean, it really annoys me. I've had many experiences of that in Destiny. And I tell these guys, can you please not speedrun, because we are live on Twitch and we are streaming the game and we want people to see it in full. They don't care at all. They just race to the strike and they get to the target as quickly as possible, obviously doing the timing. They're completely oblivious to the fact this is live on Twitch, and completely disrespectful. And I really do not appreciate that sort of activity. So many people will go through Outriders initially as a single player, but then later they'll bring in mates to do kind of repeat missions and quests, and that itself is going to be always thoroughly enjoyable. So it is within the range of, first of all, having a full immersive experience, but you are doing it by yourself, and then after that you will be combining the immersive experience with other participants coming in and doing the tasks together with you. That's the next stage. We talked about virtual reality here quite a bit a little while back, but I really think that virtual reality is unlikely to be seen as a threat, a competitor, similar to what we've seen with 3D in cinemas, because the frame, the 2D experience of a feature film is defining that media. It's defining the fact that film is a product of somebody's fantasy. It's an interpretation of how we see life, and the same thing applies to gaming. I really have a difficulty in imagining that playing Call of Duty Warzone or Resident Evil 3 would be seen as very popular if you were doing it in a fully blown virtual reality environment, because you would become an active participant in a very real environment which is no longer detached from life and world by that 2D dimension and 2D format, and therefore it would be particularly dangerous for people who perhaps are of prone to sensitivity, of weaker central nervous system, and let alone the quantity of flashing lights and photosensitivity which could be triggered. So there could be also health hazards in there. I mean, to be fair, maybe the new gen tech will be as vivid and as perfect as we can see obviously everything else in an environment through our eyes as it stands today, but it will take a bit of time. So maybe not in my lifetime, but maybe 50 years or maybe 30, 40 years there will be such technology available. But I'm really toying with the idea between two different concepts. One, where we play games to forget about real life and everyday drudgery of rat races and need to pay the bills and having issues within sort of our local community, the usual, right? The hassles of the commuting. Nearly forgot to say that one. And when looking at the screen, you can see it's two-dimensional. You switch it off, a bit like when you go to cinema. The lights come on, and that means the experience is finished. You're being brought back to your real day-to-day life, and you enjoyed 2 hours of that cinematic experience when you're entering somebody else's world. And that's exactly what the greatest strength of video gaming is. The only difference is that compared to film, video games are combining all other kinds of experiences. First of all, they combine all different types of arts, audiovisual arts, movement arts. You have music in there. Every type of art that exists is present in video gaming, and they're all interacting at all times. They're very cinematic. They have the dimension of interactivity, where people come in today with multiplayers, even cross-platform from various devices, and all together they become a fully fledged fully interactive type of experience, but you are an active participant. You're in it. So you are doing Warzone or Destiny with your mates. You keep talking amongst each other, preparing your squad in order to win, to get the best results. You are either defying, like in Destiny, AI, or in Warzone, other competitors, and through that high quality experience of the environment, you're also bringing high quality of interaction, and two of those together provide you with a fully fledged interactive experience, which again is happening out there on the screen, and you detach from it. You're not really in it. I think with virtual reality there's always a danger that you might feel you're getting lost in another fantasy-based world, which is a bit like psychosis, and you will know that people who suffer from psychosis, they can't break away from it. It's like a nightmare that never ends, and it's a living nightmare. It's a waking nightmare. We can have nightmares when we sleep, and when we wake up they're gone. We know they're gone. Nightmares could be very vivid and hard to shake off, but think about it. If you were to be living a nightmare every single day, it's an absolutely terrifying experience. Anyway, it's a story for another day. So, the Outer Worlds and Yakuza. These were the games that I really liked and played during this weekend. To be precise, the Outer Worlds just completely overtook, and I've done my outdoors activities, and then it was all about the Outer Worlds, and that's the way it's going to be. I'm going to carry on. And you know what happened yesterday? I played it, and then suddenly everything went dead, and there was a problem with our internet connection. There were outages here in our local North London suburbia, and there was suddenly no internet, and I had to recut it short. But things like this happen. And the beauty of modern technology is that you can see on your phone immediately that the outages are happening in your area, so you're not bothered. It's not that you lost connection due to some sort of technical fault or anything else. So, right, that was all about my Easter, and we already cracked on with a new week. We have some news coming our way, and we have some questions regarding backward compatibility, so we'll talk about that very, very shortly. So first of all, we'll crack on with a bit of news which I mentioned about 10 minutes ago, and you will recall that the news were about what? Mass Effect. And we did get some very interesting articles this weekend, and one of those was indeed published in one of my favorite online hubs, PC Gamer, but I really have a problem with their review of Outriders. You know, I really rely on the news feeds coming in from Games Radar, from Game Rant, Push Square, PC Gamer, and Eurogamer. So these are the hubs I use every day in order to collate my news, both on Twitter and here live on my podcast. And they provide me with, you know, an abundance of facts and everything. But their reviews sometimes are not really to my liking. And I've got to say, I really feel that sometimes with the younger writers and with people who are probably pushed in doing too many things at once, they don't take enough time to, you know, they don't spend enough time on a particular game in order to get a very, very good first-hand experience, but they rush it. And I did see that quite a few times, that a review would be published and I have loads of comments then underneath coming from the gaming community, people saying, well, what are you talking about? This is just not the way it is. People being put to shame. And then in a little while, if they make the same sort of error several times with blockbusters, then you can have also the publishers complaining to the magazine, and therefore that person then no longer works for that publication. It's just really, it's not really the way it should be. But anyway, I rely on these magazines for the news primarily, and I use them every single day because all of us are excited to hear, you know, hot off the press, what's coming next. And one of those is about Mass Effect Legendary Edition. So we've had a lengthy blog posting on BioWare Hub, and I'll just tell you a bit more about this article, what it says. One of the big questions about Mass Effect Legendary Edition is how it will bring the games in the trilogy together into some sort of mechanically coherent whole. The first game in the series came out way back in 2007, and after all these significant changes were made over the subsequent releases. So BioWare detailed a number of those changes in their blog post that went up a couple of days ago, running down what players can look forward to in an updated game. So some of that it covers, some of what it covers has already been announced, like fewer gratuitous shots of certain females, better handling in the Mako, or Mako I should say, it's not Mako, I keep forgetting. But this provides a much more detailed rundown of everything from combat updates to an overhaul of Mass Effect 3 Galaxy at War system. So combat changes are probably the most noteworthy overall, as Mass Effect 1 plays dramatically differently than Mass Effect 2 and 3. The first game was heavily influenced by traditional RPG mechanics, which added an element of randomness to firefights and had the effect of making weapons sometimes feel less accurate and reliable than there are in the sequels, which are more like shooters by nature. I agree with that, really. It did feel, I mean, I played Mass Effect 1 recently, we streamed it here last year a bit, and it did feel like an old gen game, and it really kind of took off in a big fashion with the sequel and the third installment of the trilogy. But irrespective of that, I thought the story and the action sequences blended perfectly in the original. This is what grabbed me when I played it first. So I wouldn't quite agree with some of the thoughts given in here, and you know, because they say that it's being kind of blended in properly with the traditional RPG mechanics. Well, I didn't think so. I thought that's exactly what Mass Effect was not. It was blending in perfectly the story with the action. It didn't feel like in the classical RPGs where story could be flimsy, but the action sequences were, you know, very, very massive. So I'll just send my take on that. We heard the consistent feedback that it was pretty frustrating to take a few shots with an assault rifle and suddenly have the reticle enlarge to span a large portion of the screen. So we looked at tuning the mechanics to provide better handling without outright scrapping the spirit of the original games. As a result, the original Mass Effect will see the following changes in the Legendary Edition. So I'll read out all the changes, and many of those are listed in here. So Shepard can now sprint out of combat, so I can be sprinting and I can get away from combat, which is not possible in the original game if you're playing it on the original disc. Melee attacks are now mapped to a button press rather than the automatically occurring based on proximity to an enemy. That's pretty good. Weapon accuracy and handling has been significantly improved. Reticle bloom is more controlled. Weapon sway removed from sniper rifles. Aiming down sights, tight aim camera view has been improved. Improved aim assist for target acquisition. That was the problem in the first game, I remember. It was very difficult to eliminate certain robots because there was a problem with aim assist. All relevant enemies now take headshot damage in the first game. Previously some did not, including humanoid enemies. Ammunition mods, anti-organic, anti-synthetic, can be dropping throughout the whole game. Previously these stopped dropping at the higher player levels. They are now also available to purchase from merchants. All weapons can be used by any clans without penalty. Specializations, the ability to train, upgrade certain weapons are still class specific. Weapons cooldown is much faster. Medigel usage has been improved. Base cooldown reduced. Leveling benefits increased. Increased Laras bonus to cooldowns. Inventory management improvements. Items can now be flagged as junk. All junk items can be converted into Omnigel or sold to merchants at once. Inventory and stores now have sorting functionality. So it's massively improved. Just think about all the changes that I've just read out. Some abilities have been rebalanced. Weapon powers, i.e. those that are unlocked on each weapon type skill tree, been improved. Effectiveness and strength is increased, and heat now resets on power activation. So there are lots of other bits in here as well. Other targeted combat updates will include squad mates can now be commanded independently of each other in the first Mass Effect, the same way you can command them individually in Mass Effect 2 and 3. Well, that's really going to make the world of difference, because you are going to be able to position your three-piece accordingly, which was not the case in the first game. Some boss fights and enemies in the first game have been tweaked to be fairer for players but still challenging. Cover's been improved across the trilogy. Additional cover added to some encounters. Entering and exiting cover is now more reliable. XPs have been rebalanced in the first game, and ammunition drops have been rebalanced in Mass Effect 2. So, ammunition drop rates been also increased in Mass Effect 2, and XP rewards in Mass Effect 1 been rebalanced, and the level cap removed to ensure that players can more reliably get to high levels on a single playthrough. Well, that's interesting. The character creator has been revamped to make it more consistent across all three games and will enable players to carry a consistent customized look through the entire trilogy. So you'll be able to basically keep one Shepard walking through all three games. The original FemShep design from Mass Effect 3 will be the default female option in all three games, and if you prefer the Mass Effect 2 FemShep, that mod is available as a preset as well. To be truthful, I've never played female Shepard. For whatever reason, I just thought Commander Shepard was a male character, and I definitely will try it now on FemShep as well. So across the board enhancements, new unified launcher for all three games, so that's pretty good. You can try any of them at any time. That will work perfectly well on the Xbox Series X model, because you have the instant access, you know, like resume, and you just get in, click, and you're in the game straight away. No loading. It includes trilogy-wide settings for subtitles and languages. Saves are still unique to each game, can be managed independently of each other. Updated character creator options, as mentioned above. FemShep from Mass Effect 3 is the new default female option in all three games. Trophies across all the trilogy have been updated. The new trophies have been added to the trilogy. Progress for some new carriers over across three games. Kill to 50 enemies across all games, for instance. Right, so the progress is being interconnected. Trophies that were streamlined into one and made redundant were removed. A number of trophies have had their objectives and descriptions and all names updated. Integrated weapons and armor DLC packs. Weapons and armor DLC packs are now integrated naturally into the game. They're obtainable via research or by purchasing them from merchants as you progress through the game, rather than being immediately unlocked from the start. This ensures overall balance and progression across ME2 and ME3. Recon Hood, ME2, and Cerberus Ajax armor, ME3, are available at the start of each game. So you have still a bit more audios remixed and enhanced across all games. Hundreds of legacy bugs from the original releases are fixed. So the most important bit of news that will probably upset quite a few Mass Effect veterans is that the Legendary Edition will not support Mass Effect 3's multiplayer mode. It's going to be no multiplayer, and I think this is probably a good decision because it will cause fewer technical problems. More practically, it also impacts the single-player campaign, so playing online was required to increase your readiness rating, which was a big influence on the outcome of the war against the Reapers. It's possible to get the best campaign outcome without playing online. It takes a lot of extra effort. With multiplayer out of the picture, the Legendary Edition will instead focus on side content from across the entire trilogy, so it will perform better. If you only play Mass Effect 3, you'll have to do just about every option available in the game to be eligible for an ending that doesn't result in massive galactic losses. Playing the first two games and carrying over your progress is the most reliable way to get good results in the final hours of the Reaper War, which is logical because everything is very much interconnected and it's based on the story. For comparison, if you previously played ME3 with the extended cut, which included galactic readiness rebalancing, fully preparing for the final fight would be more difficult to achieve than in the Legendary Edition. The good news is that thanks to bug fixes and improvements of the Paragon Renade system in Mass Effect 2, key moments that have been notoriously difficult to achieve in Mass Effect 2 and impacted on the third installment can now be completed more reliably, leading to better results in the story's final act. Well, that always ensures replayability. It's just like I said many times before, what's really fundamental if you are playing any open world games, you've got to be thorough, you've got to be methodical. So these are not the games for speedrunners and kind of fast reviewers. These are the games that will take up 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 700 hours of your time to complete, and depending on what you want to achieve, it will be the result of your hard work. And I think what really they've done with all of that adjustment is they'll make it more possible for people to get different types of gradings. So if somebody will be unhappy with the way the game went, they'll be able to either replay the whole trilogy from the beginning, or they'll go back to certain saves and they'll start out, because obviously as a veteran you will know exactly what the key points in the story really are, and you must save them separately as separate saves. You can go back and pursue another option. This is critical for the games that give you the decision-making direction, because the entire outcome will be completely different if you're pursuing it through a particular viewpoint. So remember that. Don't rely on autosaves. Keep your manual saves at critical points always fresh. Do not overwrite them. Just keep them, so you will know that there are certain sections that will provide, well, you can obviously look it up on the internet, they'll provide you with the major junction on what direction you'll be taking towards the final battle. Don't forget the Reapers are the main enemy in the trilogy, and you got to be prepared in order to contest both them and all the other enemies. So if you do want to jump straight into the big finish, the Mass Effect Genesis interactive comics created by Dark Horse will be included ahead of Mass Effect 2 and 3, so you can incorporate major plot point choices from previous games without having to actually power through them. For the infamous Mako, I will say, definitely not for the first time, that I liked in the way it was, and its removal from Mass Effect 2 and 3 was a big disappointment. That is the words of the reviewer. And so you have some other things applied to Mako: improved handling, physics turning improved to feel weightier and slide around less, improved camera controls, resolved issues preventing the Mako from accuracy, shield recharge faster, new thrusters added for a speed boost. The XP penalty while in the Mako has been removed. Touching lava no longer results in an instant mission failure and instead deals damage over time. BioWare also said that more information on changes being made for the updated trilogy, including a deeper dive into graphical updates, are on the way. So Mass Effect Legendary Edition will be out on May the 14th, so a bit less than 4 weeks from now. What I'm particularly interested in is to see whether the Legendary Edition will be released through EA Play, whether we can get it on the first day or within the first couple of weeks of its release, and if so, we'll have it on Xbox Game Pass. Maybe, maybe not. I think it depends on many other factors. and as we've seen with some of the other Electronic Arts games, they're preferring to keep it, they prefer keeping those games away from streaming platforms like Assassin's Creed or The Division or Ghost Recon, the biggest titles. But Mass Effect is fully included, the original version, so I'm wondering whether they will replace the original versions with this one. Anyway, time will tell, and I can only tell you that I'm absolutely overly excited, and this is altogether very, very good news for us all. Alright, so that's the news really. I found actually some other bits of news there on my Twitter which I was to deliver, but the news related to Mass Effect is so voluminous, and for somebody who is as dedicated veteran of the trilogy, I really want to go through every single bit for everyone to know, because if you are doubting whether you should be paying extra £60 for the new version, well, I can certainly tell you it is going to be a very, very good investment. But maybe, if you want to pre-order, do so. You probably will get some special rewards. In fact, I did get some special charms which have N7, Normandy 7, clearly displayed, and these are the charms for Apex. So Apex is celebrating the release of BioWare's Legendary Edition by dishing out these charms, which indeed you can attach to every one of your weapons. So remember that. And if you are like myself, a bit more conservative, you may wait a little while for the game price to drop. But there are pros and cons in there, because when there's a game like Outriders out on a specific day, you're really all kind of hyped up about it. You really want to be jumping in as early as possible to experience it together with your mates, and then if you need to wait, it's not really quite the same experience. Obviously everyone knows that. It's similar to premieres of major blockbusters or films. When they're released on a particular Friday, you want to be there on that day in order to see it, to be experiencing it together with an audience, and it's just that sort of experience can't be substituted. You pay for it, but you'll remember when a crew starts exploring the release of the new Call of Duty installment. You played all the other ones, so Battlefield, and it's just a wonderful experience because you're doing it for the first time, and it's worthy of the investment. It's the fact. And generally, I think very few people would be buying 20, 30, 40 games on that price. For obvious reasons, it's very, very expensive. But I'm hoping that they will consider Mass Effect Legendary Edition to be released through some of the streaming platforms, and if that's the case, we'll obviously stream it here. And the games are just mounting up, aren't they? I mean, I keep saying we're going to do Destiny, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. When are we going to be able to squeeze it in? There aren't many enough hours in a day, and anyway. Right, so we've come to our community questions, and I have a letter, a message from Tom, and he's in Brighton, and he said, I've heard the other day on your podcast that Microsoft are working on backward compatibility which is connected to xCloud. Do you know how all of this will work, and are you having any particular thoughts on the older games being brought to Android and tablets? Also, he says, I'm personally very keen on trying out some of the games on my Android because as they're older, they probably will perform very, very well, and I will have any major speed issues compared to Destiny and Outriders. Well, thanks, Tom, for writing, taking time to write, and indeed for providing us with your thoughts and views. I think I talked about backward compatibility here quite a bit, and I'll give you a rundown on what I know so far and how I'm personally experiencing it all. So first of all, to put in perspective, Xbox and Microsoft have backward compatibility. For anyone who's not familiar what this is, it's a system through which all the games, or the vast majority of the games ever released through the platform, which is Xbox, can be played on the present day platforms, right? So for instance, today we have Xbox Series X and S, or if you like myself have Xbox X or S from the previous gen. These consoles will play all the older games. Right? How it works is you need to get your disc, you need to stick the disc in, and then you will have a download which will be basically downloaded to your console, and that's basically the update which is making that game accessible on the console that you have. So a 360 game or the Xbox original, like for instance Halo Evolve, for instance, or we can talk let's say 360 Mass Effect, can be then played with ease on the console which you have, which is basically the current console. So that's the idea behind backward compatibility. They really worked on that for quite some time. because they felt the library of several thousand games, which indeed they would have built over a period of 20 years, required that degree of dedication and ease of access. They wanted, for instance, some of the members of the team, people who run Microsoft, they played Halo in 2002, so that's 18 years ago. Today they have children who are, let's say, 14, 15, and they wanted people, they wanted the tech that would enable them to play the same game with their family members. So, just like literally introducing your children to what you played when you were in your youth, right? And that just seems to be right and proper and noble and most appropriate. So this is what I worked on for quite some time. I think altogether, we're talking about 6 or 7 years of work, if I'm not mistaken. The actual work since the backward compatibility was being fully made accessible. And if you're very interested in the overall project, you can access the interviews with two of the leaders, the interviews on Xbox weekly podcast, last week's podcast this is, and you have Mr. Chowdhury, who is the senior person in xCloud department, and a lady who is a senior team leader on the backward compatibility. So they talked at length about all that is involved with the manual checks and the works which need to be completed. And when I listened to that, it was just almost eye-watering. Think about a game like Morrowind, needing to check every single item in the inventory manually in order to make it backward compatible. It's just a huge amount of work, and she said the actual work on any of the games is very time consuming and extremely difficult, but they all believe this is the best way forward, because if we did have a problem over the years, it was attached to that degree of impossibility, a PC game being played on console and vice versa, and the future is in cross-platform access and ease of use everywhere on any platform that you've got, wherever you are. So that's certainly their approach, which is based on them, it's forward thinking, the way things are going to be in the future. And I personally think that the system that they're offering is going to be, basically reaping rewards in big ways. But what we heard recently, obviously we've had backward compatibility already on our console. What we heard recently was backward compatibility for xCloud, which meant lots of older games are now made backward compatible for xCloud, and that means you can then, if you're a person who owns this game, simply access them through the xCloud services attached to your account. And they introduced 16 games the other day. Now, one of them is Morrowind, and this is the first step towards the full backward compatibility, which will be then accessible on any device, anywhere. It will take a bit of time, but they'll start out with older games because obviously they don't occupy as much space. They'll perform better, as far as the graphics are concerned, and that's the plan. I think from my point of view, what's essential is that we can access all the titles, because as a dedicated PlayStation and Xbox veteran, someone who played the games right from the beginning, I really want to be able to play all the games on any platform at any time, right? I didn't want to be buying, let's say, when I migrated to 360, these games yet again, or indeed for Xbox One, or now for the next gen Series X. I always want to be able to just stick the disc in and play the game immediately, irrespective of where I was, and that was no longer that was not possible in the older days, but today it is. And even to hear that we can do exactly the same through cloud services where a disk is not necessary is truly rewarding. And I'm very, very happy to hear this and very energized about the news after I've heard the news, because it will make it possible for Max Payne, for instance, to be played through xCloud, or any other games that we've had. So if we are looking at the way it's delivered, I think you were asking a bit about PlayStation and Xbox. Xbox is excelling, and Microsoft is investing huge amount of money in the new technology and this direction. PlayStation are not doing this, and therefore I think they're lagging behind, and they will certainly pay a very, very hefty price. If you want to play, for instance, some of the games which originally they're proprietary games, exclusives like Resident Evil, you can't play it on PlayStation 4 console or even on PlayStation 5 unless you repurchased the version which was then adapted, and updated for the use on the present day and age console. And that is a serious issue. Why would I want to be paying 3 or 4 times for that Resident Evil, which in fact I purchased originally when I had my PlayStation 1, and why can't this game be made backward compatible through the services which are instantly streamable, or the ones that will give you digital download? Because obviously everything is going down the route of digital downloads and digital streaming rather than physical products. And this is where I feel PlayStation are not up to scratch. Also, they did say, the CEO said recently, they will not be divorcing from the idea of Sony exclusives, because they believe Sony exclusives like The Last of Us and Horizon Zero Dawn, God of War are the games that are bringing them huge number of participants, and also they're generating sales for the consoles. And you don't forget, these games are single player games, so people will need both the console and indeed the copy of the game in order to crack on, to experience the adventure. I think that's something that will be seen as outdated. It's similar to, for instance, discussions I had with my friends who are elderly gents, people who spent 50-60 years in cinemas, and they're resisting anything to do with 4K and digital technology. They have one very good friend who is a veteran of film viewing at the British Film Institute, and he categorically decided that this is a straightforward decision, that he will never ever go and watch anything which is streamed or delivered through a digital format, digital projectors in cinemas. He always wants to watch something on 16 or 35mm, and basically he's run out of films to watch. We have a couple of places in London that still screen films on 35, but it's just very, very few screenings overall, compared to obviously the old, where every one of the screenings would be based on 35mm. And he's categoric. He doesn't want to, buckle. But eventually, he will run out of any films to see, because there will be no more 35mm. And the only reason they kept some 35mm projectors, like in Prince Charles Cinema and the BFI, is, well, first of all, to do with the films that are still not accessible on the digital format. On the other, it's in order to monetize, because there is an opinion, and I, to a degree agree with it, that the films which you watched on 35, they had a particular texture. They looked in a particular way. They, the way you experience the world given to you, let's say when you watched Godfather, Deer Hunter, Taxi Driver, just to name a few, was based on the way this image was captured on film. And I remember watching these films on 35 quite a few times, and I also watched them through their digital versions, where digitally remastered, polished up, cleaned up, ultra razor sharp images and all that. So I absolutely adore and love that clean cut, razor sharp imagery. But I watched some films on these prints, Deer Hunter is one of those, and my experience of the film was quite significantly different after I watched them on these new prints. It was something to do with the perception, how this world was actually experienced by the viewer. And that's one of the reasons as to why some people are highly reluctant to embrace the new technology, because they'll say it is affecting the way you see the film. And it's true, it is affecting the way you see the film, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the effect could not be heightened, i.e. if a film was great, that it would not be made even better by, so I guess it's down to own personal experience, because I will associate watching, for instance, Godfather, Deer Hunter or Taxi Driver with these particular cinemas where I watched it, and I will associate the original viewings of these films with the way the world was, what I was experiencing at the time, what dinner I had, what restaurants I visited, what friends I had, where I lived. All of that is interconnected. So it's the overall perceptual experience of that film at the time, because that film and the screenings will have the history. It's like a seminal film of that era, the 70s. I didn't watch them in the 70s, I watched them in the 80s, but nevertheless, it's just the whole iconography attached to the film viewing experience, and that's then affecting the perception of that film. It's not that much to do with the actual film. If you never saw any of these films before, which is the case with many of those rarer titles that we watched at the BFI in recent years, that we had lots of films that were digitally remastered and reworked through Cinemateca Bologna in Italy, and a couple of French film institutes. They have various institutions that do remastering. And Stiftung, for instance, the Monau Stiftung is the company. It's usually in Germany, and we watched films which were otherwise from the silent era or the early talkies, or sometimes even from the 50s, and they look absolutely stunning. They're really and truly wonderful. I've not seen these films before, so I had no preconceptions about them, had no any other filmgoer iconography like the ones I described attached to any of those, but they were just like massively enhanced. So coming back to Sony and Xbox, if Sony do not want to embrace the new technology and the new ways to which they'll be able to monetize, they will basically lose the ability to compete, and that's certainly my perception. I've got to say that I tried quite a number of backward compatible games on my setup, and not to play in full, but just to have a look, and they performed very well. The difficulty with a game like, for instance, Splinter Cell or Indiana Jones, or any of the other ones that I played recently, is that they've not been reworked for next gen. So they can play well, they have a good frame rate, but they've not been done up properly for the next gen, which means it's not a remaster. They've been just tailored for the use on those next gen platforms, and therefore the images, the quality and everything else will be very much of the old gen, right? And also don't forget, the old tellies didn't have a major widescreen format, so you will have those black bars to the left and to the right of your screen if you're watching or playing these games on your state-of-the-art TV of today. And still, we are not that bothered with those black bars left and right. We are very delighted that we can just play these games at any time with our family and friends, in order to remind ourselves of the old experiences whilst we were doing the game for the first time, and also sharing those with our family members is something that I think Xbox is having a particular take on. They really want many games to be family friendly, and if you're familiar with the stores, Microsoft stores, they advertise all kinds of games like Apex or Destiny or Warzone, but actually when you go there, you can't play these games on the setups because they're not considered to be family friendly. What you can play in a Microsoft store is only family friendly games, and that will be obviously quite a great number, but they may not be including the titles like the popular ones, Gears of War, Halo. They will not be there. They don't come in that category, and they're taking the direction where they believe doing the family-friendly titles and making them accessible on all platforms is the future, inclusive of backward compatibility. So, if you're asking me, I'm slightly biased towards that. I feel that's the next gen, and the companies not embracing it will pay the price. The other thing that you asked was about my personal preferences. Well, there are some issues in there, and I give you the biggest issue I have with backward compatibility as it is today. I have a very large library of games, and for every single game which is registered on my account, which is a DRBMiller account with Microsoft, right? So obviously the games have been recognized by the system virtually on the server as mine. I purchased them, and these are legally owned games. They're games produced by whatever publisher. The code, the licensing code is on them. They've been read and registered on my account. But as it stands today, and this might change now with xCloud Access, I'll have to see. As it stands today, I will need that physical copy to load the game, and that defies the purpose of instant access from anywhere, because if you have no copy and the game's registered in your account, you will not be able to access the game, and that is a very serious issue, because for all of us, What we want to have is a library of games which are stashed somewhere virtually in order to access at any given moment in time. And that should be and that is the purpose of xCloud. So I think if there's one downside as it stands today, everything else is perfect, as I said, is the need to be having that physical copy, because ultimately the technology, a bit like the use of PIN on your Visa debit card, should authorize you as the sole owner, i.e. the owner of the game, and should also verify your identity through some other method in order to access it virtually. Or maybe the capacity for the update to be basically downloaded to your console because the game's already registered. Something that will prevent the need from needing to carry your discs with you. This is where the difficulty is with the backward compatibility as it stands. I mean, you'll know that with the libraries that are currently available, and also with the titles accessible through their stores, everything can be repurchased digitally. So once you have it digitally loaded, once it's sitting in your account, then there's no problem with any form of replayability anywhere, wherever you are. But just think that, all I heard from the big cheese there on backward compatibility didn't really tackle this issue. I mean, I understand that if I can access my games through xCloud, it's 16 at the moment, I should be able to do that. But in fact, I need to explore maybe further the methods and the ways to which they're going to be delivering the gameplay. Because I still think needing to get that disc in is, it's becoming really completely outdated. And don't forget, consider how many hundreds of millions of discs were produced worldwide. They will become completely obsolete. Nobody will even look at them, in the same way as we had the issue with VHS tapes, and presently we have with DVDs, and nobody wants to be purchasing DVDs anymore in Britain. Nobody. It's just a completely outdated format that I've seen with our charity shops. You get sometimes at night a van popping up with 6 or 10 boxes of DVDs and just ditch them like rubbish, and nobody wants to look at them. They can't sell them even for 10 pence each. I mean, think about it. And for how many years? For 2 decades we had DVDs, for 15 years certainly, DVDs being sold for 15, 16 pounds a piece, and special editions 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds. And nobody wants to even look at these anymore. I mean, nobody. You have collectors and avid film buffs, and a very, very small number of people. But I'm just talking about the consumers, the overall number of potential customers who will be interested in the acquisition, and they're definitely not there. And I've got to say, in a charity shop here where I live, there were 10, 15 boxes out there, and they were left for the whole weekend. Nobody even looked at them. Nobody looked at them. They were just literally left on the street. Nobody even looked at them. So eventually I went there and collected the whole lot, because my heart sank. And there were some really fantastic films in there. Loads of discs were not even still in factory wrappers. So it was somebody who was probably running a shop, and the shop went bankrupt, or didn't want to resell DVDs anymore, and they were obviously donating it to a charity, and even a charity wouldn't take it because of the sheer volume of the discs and no space. Just purely practical reason, we have no space, therefore we can't. So put them in a wheelie bin, and that's about it. And that's exactly what it was. They put them all in a wheelie bin. So really coming back to it, these issues will need to be resolved, and I'm certainly hoping that Microsoft will make sure that we can verify our ownership and our identity in respect of all the titles that we have registered already on our account, and therefore there'll be no need for any extra discs to be on us, because otherwise thousands of discs need to be carried around the world. That's not really what they want. But we'll find out. And thanks to Tom for asking these questions. I think what I'll need to do is I'll need to maybe send them an email and ask questions. And what better way to do that but simply to utilize on the interview that is still present there on the weekly podcast, and can just reference Tom and his questions and people from my community. Let's see what they will say. And don't forget, if you have any questions, the guys working on the tech side of things, they're instantly accessible on Twitter. They're not like film superstars, you know, they don't have many followers and people do not know who they are, but you can find them through Xbox Wire, and there will be links in there for you to contact them, so you can always click on that at whatever the user ID of that person is, and then send them a message, and they will be very, very glad to hear from you. Don't forget, they're very interested in all that community members have to say, and all they do is today based on you know, the reflections of what their community indeed will be requesting, you know, and that experience is significantly different compared to maybe 10-15 years ago, where it was all about producing games and selling them to customers. Today it's all about what people actually want and tailoring your services and products to the demands, you know. And we've seen, for instance, there was a lot of rebellion about some of the suggestions that were introduced in respect of Xbox Live Gold and the charges and the pricing ranges, and they just simply retracted whatever was originally suggested within one weekend. They saw there was an avalanche of complaints, and they said, well, okay, people don't like it, we're not going to do it. And there was no need for it either. Alright, so that's all about backward compatibility. Once again, thank you, Tom, for asking us these questions. I'm glad that you are enjoying Outriders, and indeed I'm very glad to hear that you will be trying out some of the games on your Android. I can certainly recommend you the app. So if you want to try some of the games, go to the app and you have Play with Touch section, right? Play with Touch, you click on that and click on that small tab that indicates See All, right? See All, click on that, they get all the titles, and you know, you can just choose from any of these. You've got two different types of titles. Play with Touch is the one which you do not need your controller for. You can pull out your phone, you're in a park, and you can crack on wherever you are, whenever you want. And with your controller, you'll have games like Gears of War 5 and Destiny and a few other ones. Don't forget, if you're using a controller, it needs to be the latest, the next gen, well, not next gen, the latest gen controller, I should say, that has Bluetooth connectivity. And also you need to have at least a couple of those rechargeable batteries. Remember that, because the gaming on your Android will basically bleed the batteries very, very fast. So you'll need to have at least a couple in order to recharge, in order to, you know, replace the ones that have gone, if you want to have a lengthier session. If you want to do it for half hour, then obviously there'll be no issues. Alright, my friends, we've come to the end of our podcast for today, so thank you for writing us messages, and thank you for listening and watching and supporting my channel. Hope I made some sense. Hopefully I've given you some ideas on what's happening out there. We'll carry on as usual. There'll be no streams today yet again, but my podcast, and I'll be still waiting for Outriders technical issues to be fully sorted before we get back to it, and we'll have a bit more of Destiny. I've got now Destiny back on my PlayStation. We'll also be looking at maybe Warzone, not this week, but maybe week the next, you know, what's the week now? Yeah, next week. And I need to get my usual suspects back together. We have new Twitch rules which will need to be read by everyone who will be participating live online. But I really kind of miss, you know, I miss my friends. I miss my daily, regular couple of hours of interactions, which became everyday occurrence really for quite a few months, and we've had none of that during the last couple of weeks. So that is certainly something I look forward to, in addition to some of the fabulous titles out there, like Outriders, like the Outer Worlds, and all the other ones I told you about today. So thank you for watching, thank you for supporting my channel, thank you for being valued members of the community, and I'll see you all later.